Welcome back to another edition of the Fried Egg Golf Podcast. I am your host, Andy Johnson. Today, we have a little bit different episode for you. This week was great moment in my journey as the founder of Fried Egg Golf. It is, a company that's grown from just me making stuff in a very rudimentary way 9 years ago to a full-fledged team. This week we had I would say it's kind of our first ever team offsite, where we got everybody, we're a fully remote company together. Many of our colleagues here had never met. It was great to just get together, spend time together. It's one of the challenges of remote work is that you don't have these personal relationships with people. You have a virtual relationship. So it was a wonderful week. And I thought what would be fun is get a variety of voices to come on the podcast and answer a couple questions. A few of these people are people that do a lot of stuff for us that you don't hear necessarily from all that often. Due to some microphone and time constraints, we didn't get everybody on the team on it. But that might be something I do in the future. Big thanks to everyone that listens to this podcast over the years and has supported us for, a number of years and in a number of ways that has been, created this opportunity for us to have such a great team that's growing. And we're super excited, after spending a couple days talking about the future and some of the stuff we want to do. We're very excited about where we're going, and it wouldn't happen without all of the people that listen to this podcast, read our stuff, our members of Club TFE's support. So big thanks to you guys, and also a big thanks to the team that puts in so much tireless hard work to make everything possible and all of our products as good as we possibly can. So thanks to you guys. All right, before we get to this podcast, let's talk about our partner Stripe. Stripe is someone I'm thankful for because they helped me, a entrepreneur, stand up a payment solution so that I was able to sell stuff on our website. In the early days of Fried Egg, I was not an expert developer. I was not an expert at building websites, but Stripe makes it super, super easy to use. And it made it possible for somebody like me to, create products that people could buy. They work with small companies, small entrepreneurs. At the time we first used Stripe, we were a one-person company. It was me. To powering massive enterprises, such as Alaska Airlines, Salesforce, Squarespace, Zoom, WordPress, companies that take, thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even some of them millions of payments a day. In fact, Stripe works with so many businesses. They work with millions of businesses of all different sizes around the world. And because of their, how many businesses they work with and how many, products are purchased and different things are purchased using Stripe, they power 1% of the total global GDP. I can promise you that Stripe has a solution that will help your business. And if you want to learn more, go to stripe.com. All right, let's get to the podcast. This is going to run through just our staff. I kind of give everybody an intro, so that's the way it's going to go. And I loved all the questions or all the answers. They were all different. Nobody gave the same answer despite not hearing everybody else's. It was fun to do this podcast, and thank you all for listening and supporting us through the years.
Matthew, you traveled quite a bit in 2024. I'm curious if this is going to be a golf course that you've played a long time ago, or you played a lot, or a golf course that you recently played. What's the course that you most think about?
I think this isn't actually a golf course, but more of a type of golf course that I think about a lot. And it actually includes two golf courses that I played this year. This type of golf course, actually both happen to be 9-hole golf courses, but they're both kind of these very rudimentary style designs that just kind of sit across the land. And the first one is the Hay Harbor Club, which is on an island off of New York, Fisher's Island to be specific. And this course was designed, I think, in the early or the late 1800s. So it's a very rudimentary style golf course that just lays across the land, and it kind of utilizes the land in a really interesting way, takes you around the property in a really cool way, and gives you views of the ocean. And I played it by myself on a kind of summer day, strong breeze coming off the water, and I was just walking around smiling the whole time because of how delightful it was just to be out there and experiencing something that's so rudimentary and just like basic, but using the land in such an interesting way and taking you on this really interesting journey. And the other course that kind of fits into this category that I think about a lot is Augusta Wind Golf Club in rural Nebraska. It's the same idea, but it is actually a more modern golf course, and it was built in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and it was just laid out by some farmers and ranchers, and it's the same concept. It's very simple. There's not a lot to it. It was built on basically no budget, and it just lays across the land, and it uses the land in really interesting ways. And I find those type of golf courses just to be the most interesting and kind of engaging, and it kind of just takes you back to this raw form of golf where it's just you and the land and your golf ball. And I just find that so compelling. And those are two courses that I think about constantly.
Yeah, I think like what you hit on is interesting in the sense of like the idea of golf, and it's kind of like the purest form of it. And, you know, like when you think about how golf started, it was not formalized the way it is now. It was just, there's the hole, here's your stick of ball, and go get it in the hole. And it's like, you know, you just played over dunes, and like you see the old pictures of old Tom and like a match, and it's just like gnarly grass, and it's not this like extremely well presented, well kept and formal game that it is now. Like it was much more just raw. And I think the idea of these golf courses like Hay Harbor, for example, where like you don't need to have the greens running 12 when you have a plot of land that's like right on the ocean. It's going to be, the natural elements are going to be plenty to make you think, and it's going to change every day. And then Augusta Wind, obviously it's in the Nebraska Sandhills, like you get just awesome land, you know, that can make it feel different on a daily basis. What's the trip that you most want to take in 2025?
This is a tough one. I was thinking about it for a while. It's not necessarily a golf course, but I really enjoy national parks and visiting national parks. And my girlfriend and I have recently got into rock climbing, and we've been doing a lot of rock climbing outdoors in Colorado where we live.
With ropes, or are you just free?
We do both. So we do a style called bouldering where you're not getting too high off the ground, and then we also do it with ropes where you are getting, you know, pretty high off the ground, but it's just kind of singular pitch. So it's anywhere between 50 and maybe 110 feet off the ground, which is kind of like the very entry level style. But where I'm going with this is I've been watching all these videos of Yosemite Valley, and it's probably the most popular climbing spot in the world, kind of most world famous in America. And I just feel like that environment and the experience of being down in that valley with these 2,000-foot walls, like cascading over your heads, is like, it just seems like a magical place. And that's somewhere I really, really want to go see in the near future. Whether or not I rock climb there or not, it's something really interesting that I'd like to go see.
Yeah,
I'm bummed. I was supposed to go to Yosemite this year, but we had like a freak August snowstorm. We were going to camp. There's like a high alpine or high mountain or high desert, whatever lake called Tenaya Lake that we were going to camp near. That's like apparently like sand bottom and like absolutely gorgeous. And we were ready to go. We had the car all packed, and then this like crazy weather system rolled in, and it was good. And I have a toddler, so it was like this was going to be the first big camp, and it was like lows of like 20 in August, and it's like, we can't do this. can't do it. So I'm bummed. I need to get back. I really need to get to Yosemite next year too. There's a golf course there, Wawana.
Yeah, I could add that onto the itinerary.
Yeah, I was gonna like stop by real quick on a drive out, but that'll be a great trip. Favorite pro golf moment in 24?
Ooh, there's a lot to choose from. I think the
Are
first.
there a lot to choose from?
No, not really. But the one that really sticks out, and I think is like a very cliche and obvious answer, is the U.S. Open at Pinehurst. And there's a specific moment during that like really, really clicked with me when Rory was hitting, I think it was a 5-iron into the 5th green, a par 5, and he hits this seemingly perfect golf shot. It's rolling up towards the pin, and it doesn't have enough steam to kind of get over this false front. And then it just takes a left turn, rolls down this hill, down into like this sandy waste area. And he hits like a seemingly perfect golf shot, but it's not quite precise enough. And it like really illuminated to me the fact that Pinehurst like has this certain aspect where like it has a very, very high level of precision. And when you get a golf course that does that to these professionals, it is the absolute most compelling way to like watch the game of golf get played at the highest level. And it was like so illustrative throughout the entire golf course, is like this really, really high level of precision is needed to execute like these golf shots. And it's just so compelling to watch the best players in the world kind of under the tightest microscope, as compared to just bombing the ball, making a ton of birdies. And it's kind of just like, oh, like how many putts did he make today? And not how well did he execute every type of golf shot and kind of achieve this high level of precision.
Yeah, a lot of people were at that point screaming that Pinehurst is unfair because of where, like you don't get up that front and then you roll down and do like a terrible place. Like, I think that's one of the things that's interesting about it is like you just like almost hit that shot on 5. And like one of the worst places you can be in, and it can get really dicey because like it could roll one way or the other, and get whether you're in the bunker or like if you get in the waste, it's just you're like that's the worst place you could be on the hole.
Yeah.
But like what's interesting, I think about it is like that's the risk you take. Like the people that say that's unfair, it's like, well, there has to be a risk for going for it in 2. It makes people think. It makes like you wonder if you should bail out to the right. But he was trying to hit a great shot. He was trying to win the tournament. I think the other thing, like what you hit on with Pinehurst and like the level of like everybody is going to focus in on like the finish of that tournament. But he made so many great up and downs after that moment. Like I think he got up and down on 6, 7, and 8. And then he birdied 9. But like the up and downs, like the up and down on 7 was so hard. He got in it. He made it look so easy. Like all these shots, like I think like that's the thing is like he went through like a little period in that round where he wasn't playing his best. Then he played like it's like it was such an embodiment of a golf round where like he had ebbs and flows of when he played well, when he was struggling, he got through it. He started to play really well in the middle of the back 9. And then he just didn't close out the round, which is like kind of the beauty of golf.
Yeah. And it kind of highlights that like precision, like you have to be precise for 18 golf holes or else you're not going to win the golf tournament. And that's the really interesting part about a course like that with professionals. Like it really showed who was playing the most precise for 72 golf holes, and that player won.
Yeah, there was I think like the other thing about Pinehurst when you think back to it is like the amount of mental stress that golf course maybe puts on somebody, and especially over 4 rounds. You know, like 4 rounds of playing that golf course in a high stakes, major championship has a different level of mental, I think, challenge than most golf courses.
Yeah, like that if you're like the slightest bit off, it could cause you like serious trouble, and you can make a bogey or double bogey. And that's like kind of what happened to Rory. He hits a shot where he's seemingly going to make eagle, and then he's like struggling to make par. And
I think he made a bogey.
Yeah, and I think he made bogey. Like he hits the chip shot up, and once again he's not quite precise enough, and it rolls all the way back down to his feet. So it's just like a very, very compelling way to watch the best players in the world play, and there's not very many golf courses out there that can do that.
All right, thank you, Matt. You'll be on the pod more in 2025. I'm excited to see where your travels take you.
Yeah, I'm excited too. Hopefully we can get to Greenland and check out Nuke Golf Club.
All right. Voice and personality you're very familiar with. Garrett Morrison joins me.
People might not be familiar with this version of my voice. I have completely lost my voice. I've got a little bit of allergies going on, but mainly it was our team activity last night that I think did this to me. Have you described yet what we did?
You lost the game show.
Well, my team did lose the game show. We went to a vintage game show. I don't know even how to describe this. It's like a simulated vintage game show where they play.
There was no simulation. There was a competition and your team lost.
Listen, we won the skill-based portion of the game, and we all know that. You guys won the game of chance at the end, and there are a bizarre amount of points awarded to that game at the end, but we all know what happened. We don't need to tell our listeners.
I think it was very much a game of skill, and we learned that PJ is not very good at that game of skill. Putting up a bagel for his team when they needed points at a bad spot. So
he did manage to guess the phrase Tommy Lee Jones as Agent K with all of maybe 2 letters as clues. So I'll give him credit for that.
No, it was Sylvester Stallone as Rocky Balboa.
Oh, that might have been the one.
Yeah.
The other one was Bo.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, suffice it to say, there was a lot of shouting, and a couple of us lost our voices.
Yeah, I mean, I would have been shouting after losing too. So, anyways, Garrett, what is the golf course that you find yourself thinking about the most right now?
I think about Talking Stick Udom course a lot right now. Saw it for the first time earlier this year. My colleague Cameron and I went to Arizona to do a variety of things, but one of those things was to go play and photograph the Udom course at Talking Stick, formerly known as the North Course, I believe. But this was built by Corin Crenshaw in 1998, so fairly early on in Corin Crenshaw's body of work, I guess you could say, a couple of years after they built Sand Hills in Nebraska, maybe 5 or 6 years after they built Kapalua. So this was one of their first kind of big projects, 36 holes at Talking Stick. They're now known as the Peeposh course and the Udom course. The Udom course is the one with more of a desert theme, and I found it a lot more appealing. The Peeposh course, a little more conventional. It was kind of, I think, Corin Crenshaw's meeting their clients halfway, maybe giving them something a bit more conventional and something a bit more experimental. The Udom course, more experimental.
I enjoyed hearing Bill talk about Talking Stick, and like the idea of like he got off the site, knew they were building 36 holes, and called up Ben, and Ben called up Ben and said, "I need everything you got."
He called all of his associates and said, "I need everything you got. I need all of your ideas for flat land golf holes."
Yeah. What is it about the Udom course that particularly you reminisce or makes you kind of just what is it that appeals
Sticks
to
it
your
in my
brain?
head.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's exactly that it's a flat, almost featureless piece of land. The worst piece of land, I think, by quite a bit that Core and Crenshaw have ever built a golf course on. They built some golf courses on weird pieces of land, but never anything that was just a completely blank canvas like this. And so it's an opportunity to see what Core and Crenshaw do when they're not given anything, because they're known for making the most of a great piece of land, right? That's what Sandhills is. A piece of land that had hundreds of possible golf holes, and they found a really good sequence of them. But that's one kind of accomplishment. Another kind of accomplishment is to take nothing and make something out of it and still be yourself. They didn't do what Pete Dye would have done on this property. They built a Core and Crenshaw golf course. And yet, and so they were respecting the lay of the land and the character of the land. And yet it's so interesting. It's so much more interesting of a golf course than most architects would have built there. And they didn't really seem to do that much. When you play the course, you think, oh, most of this must be natural. But they built almost all of it and made it feel as though it belonged to this place in the world. Every hole is memorable somehow. And that's really hard to do when you are taking kind of a restrained approach to a nothing piece of land. So it's kind of a magic trick that they did with this golf course. It's one of the smartest golf courses I think I've ever seen. And when I played it first, I was very interested in all the kind of strategic puzzles that the holes were presenting, and I enjoyed the course a lot. But the more I thought about it and the more I reflected on it, I was like, I can't believe they did this. It's one of the most remarkable designs, I think, of the modern era, and I think highly underrated, and one that people can go play and see for themselves.
I think when you think about the idea of constructing a golf course from nothing, there are really like two extremes that you have to do. You have to either go like David Kahn and Tim Jackson said this to me about Scottsdale National, because I think this is like in the same city, complete opposite end of the spectrum. But I was, they asked like, what do you think? And I'm like, well, that thing had to be there. I was looking at a 60-foot tall, 600-yard hill that looks like a mountain.
It's so big that you can't believe that you wouldn't have thought that they would have built it. This is kind of the Fazio method. Yeah. He did this a lot.
I think they went bigger than that. I was like, there's no way that's fake. And they're like, well, that's fake.
Right.
Like that was constructed. But it was so, you can't fathom the idea of it being built, or you have to build stuff so small that it fits within, that it's feasible that could exist in the flat landscape. And that's what they did at Talking Stick.
Yes.
I actually have a similar, I think about it around a Talking Stick, but it was years ago.
You played a long time ago, right?
Yeah,
This was pre-Fried Egg, really heavy interest in golf course design for the sake of golf course design.
And the reason I think about it is I had this gnarly bout of flu. I was in Phoenix for work, and I was there for a couple weeks, and I had this gnarly sickness. And then it was like I started to feel okay. I was like, I'm going to go out and play golf, and I booked a very late afternoon tee time at Talking Stick North. And at that time they were Talking Stick did a music festival, and literally I was playing as the sun was going down. It was like, it's like if you go to music festivals, like the best time is when you're there during the day, and then that moment when the sun starts to go down is like
a music festival.
Yeah, it's like a magical time at a music festival. And I was like playing golf during this time, and it was going down. I'm listening to the music, like it was music that I would listen. I was listening to.
What kind of music
time.
was it? Do you remember?
It was Capital Cities. I remember.
Cool.
It was so this was probably like 2013, 2014 ish, 2013 probably. And yeah, it's like a round I think back to, because it's like just this moment. It's like, what's better than this, playing golf by yourself and having the music, and if you're playing a golf course you're enjoying, in beautiful weather. And this was like, it's funny because like you think about like the economy of golf. Like I remember booking that tee time for like $25 or like $30.
It's
like
very
just like
different
how
now.
much golf has changed. Like
Yeah.
the tee times there are in the hundreds.
Yes, they are. It's one of the troubles with Talking Stick. I don't think it's a great value proposition. The Udom course is a great golf course, and so I'd have a hard time saying it's not worth it to go play there. But it's a bummer that it's no longer an affordable option, which it used to be.
Yeah. Where are you most looking forward to taking a trip to?
This might be a 2026 thing, but I have my eye on Canada. I know it's a big country, so that's pretty unspecific, but the mountains of Canada, I want to go see Banff Springs. I want to go see Jasper Park, especially. Jasper Park, the town and the golf course, the resort, got hit by a pretty devastating wildfire just this past year, and they're in the process of rebuilding. But this is one of the world's great public golf courses, one of the jewels of Canadian golf architecture. And I have always really wanted to see this course, but I think especially after they rebuild and get the course back, I think this is an opportunity for them to maybe return to some principles of this golf course, to maybe do some good work out there that needed to be done. And so really looking forward to seeing Jasper Park and following that story. But there are a number of courses out in those mountains that I'd like to see. A lot of them are pretty far apart from each other, so I'm not sure how I'm going to get from place to place. I hear there's a great train line that kind of runs through this part of the country. But I'd love to explore some mountain golf in Canada. And then secondarily, just go to Vancouver, Canada, which is not far from where I live. Yeah, it's Pacific Northwest. I probably should have gone there already, but there are some cool golf courses there, Capilano, Shaughnessy, and some places that I need to see. And that's a more reasonable goal maybe for 2025, 2026. Maybe we start looking at the mountains.
Yeah, that's a trip. It's funny. Like there are certain places that I've talked about going for a very long time. And I feel like Banff and Jasper Park on this journey were like discussions about going in like 2016. It's a place that my wife would love to come with.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And
that's the thing. Banff, great place for taking a family.
Yeah. And it's like funny because like every year it like rattles around. And I feel like there's been like a discussion about maybe this is the year, but it never seems to fit in. And
it's a tough one to pull the trigger on because it's pretty remote and it's sort of an intimidating trip in a lot of ways.
If you're on the West Coast though, it's like it's a short direct flight.
Yeah, Alaska flies to a lot of these places from a lot of the West Coast airports. So yeah, it's doable, but there's something that's a little bit distant and intimidating about it, and you just have to work through that and plan a week around it. Did Matt say he wanted to go to Nuke?
No, he kind of jokingly.
I was here for the tail end of the conversation.
He wanted to go to Yosemite.
Oh, has he not been to Yosemite? Have you been to Yosemite?
Well, I told the story. I was supposed to go, but we had a freak summer snowstorm that derailed our camping trip.
My wife and I did our honeymoon in Yosemite. Oh, it was awesome.
This is a Yosemite National Parks podcast today.
Yeah, people got to go to Yosemite. I don't have any problem with that. All right, let's.
What's your favorite moment in pro golf in 2024?
Todd Hamilton at the Open Championship.
What happened again?
He just had the most over the top slappy move.
I remember that.
So the way we split up social media duties at the Open Championship is that
you had the late night.
That
was right at the start of the Open.
Right at the beginning of the Open. And so I stayed up late. I always stay up late on the first night of the Open at least. And I'm manning our social media channels and sort of keeping them going before other people wake up elsewhere in the country. And I'm sitting there watching the Open, and up to the tee steps Todd Hamilton. I forgot which Open he won. Was it 2004?
Yeah. Sonar Tech. The Sonar Tech hybrid.
The Sonar Tech hybrid. and obviously a great golfer. And I've seen plenty of these past champions play in Opens and Masters, and they still have basically the golf swings that they had back in the day. Ian Woosnam, even as his body deteriorated from many, many glasses of wine and rich meals
And hot dogs.
He still swung the golf club like Ian Woosnam. It may have been a little bit shorter, but there was still the essence of that move. And so I was expecting Todd Hamilton to have something resembling a professional golfer's golf swing. And he steps up to the tee and just puts the most unbelievably over the top 19 handicappers move on the ball. And the shape of the shot is like a low slice. and I don't want to cast aspersions here. He ended up shooting 79, 80, clearly not an 18 handicap, but also, not on the level of most of the members of this field. But I don't think I've seen a golf swing like that in a professional golf tournament, at least in a long time. And it was just delightful to see somebody try to make their way around the golf course with this move. And so it was hilarious, but there was also something a little bit touching about it. And the fact that he was putting himself out there, that he knew this is what he was coming to the golf course with. And he still went out there. All respect to Todd Hamilton.
I think the scoring was very impressive. It shows it shows the level of how true professional golfers, how they can get around a golf course, because the shooting
put a handicap on himself with this
shooting
one.
79, 80 or whatever he shot is unfathomable when you watch that swing.
Well, he just must have such wonderful hands.
Yeah. Well,
because
it's
if
also
you're physically moving like that, you have to save it with your hands.
Also just understanding I'm going to miss here, I'm going to avoid this, and I'm going to get up and down 10 times around. That's what we have to do.
I loved it. It was my favorite golf watching of the year that night. And also just the feeling of kind of being alone in the middle of the night and watching this happen on the screen, and then going on the internet and being like, hey, did you guys see this?
Yeah.
It was a great moment that kind of took me back to an earlier time in golf Twitter, and also just the innocence of watching funny golf. I think that's something we don't get to see a lot on the assembly line PGA Tour these days, different quirky kinds of swings. This was definitely that, and it really stuck with me. I'm glad that you didn't remember it completely.
Yeah,
that I got to bring that back
it's
into your
because
mind.
I was sleeping.
That's true. Yeah, it's
stay
not
up
as vivid
late
for you. Yeah,
you stay up late. My Open Championship is go to bed at the same time as my 4-year-old daughter and wake up at 2 a.m.
Ugh.
I love it.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, being in a dark house, a quiet house.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if your kids are up with you, they're usually pretty quiet at that time. They haven't yet worked themselves up into a frenzy.
They are not up at 2 a.m., but that would be trouble.
I think
silent time.
I think when my son was 1, that I had a couple of open days when it was 2 or 3 a.m. But anyway, yeah. Todd Hamilton. Good stuff.
All right, Garrett. I'm looking forward to hearing about 2025 when the time rolls around. But we'll hear you on the podcast way more, obviously, in the future.
Yeah,
so,
big plans for 2025. Thanks
and
for having me on the
24.
Yeah.
All right, I am now joined by Will Knights. Will probably traveled more than me this year. He was a man of the road this year, for sure. Moving, traveling, honeymooning, running fried egg events, lots of places visited. First question, Will, what golf course do you find yourself thinking about the most these days?
I think as far as recency bias goes, and maybe it wouldn't really matter, but I can't stop thinking of our trip to Old Town Club that we took in October. It happened to be the last one that we did for Fried Egg event season. But I've heard nothing but amazing things from you and Garrett over the years about that place. And I think your quote was that there's not 10 places in the country that you would rather play at that time of year. And truly blown away by that experience. Everything from conditioning to the actual golf course itself was just blew me away from start to finish. And I know that was the first time back for you in a couple of years. So I was wondering how that related to your first experience back there.
Yeah, I mean, they've done like substantial work. They did a renovation. They have new grass on the greens. They went to Bermuda grass on the greens. But I mean, the golf course is phenomenal. It's just, I think like something you like kind of forget. It's like funny how like when you go around, you see a bunch of golf courses, and then it had been probably 4 or 5 years since I had been back, that like you forget about like how much you like a place. But like I like drove in the parking lot, and then I looked out when I was walking down with my golf bag, and I looked out and just saw like the third hole, and I was like, oh yeah, I just love how I think what my favorite thing about that place is just how they have it presented to where, the fairways drape so far over the hills that when you hit the line of charm, you have like great opportunities to make birdies. But like when you're just a little bit off that line of charm, what happens is you like catch the hills that like just like throw your ball, and your ball just keeps rolling out of position. And I think that's like one of the things that's great. And obviously we had an awesome day. It was 75, hadn't rained in a while. It was breezy, and the golf course was in just absolutely phenomenal shape. Is there a particular hole or stretch of holes that you were really fond of?
I think what sticks out to me most is when you crest the hill on 4 and it just keeps curving around the corner, and every yard left that you don't try to hug the right side of the fairway, it like just bounds further down the hill. And you can't help but just laugh at how dead you are when you're on the left side. You're basically, it was at 8-7 fairway over there, and you're so out of position. You can't get at the green. The bunkers are just right in your way. And looking back at that hole, I mean, golf architecture really clicked for me in college when I played Prairie Dunes for the first time. We had an event there. And so getting to see Maxwell at Old Town was like, that just was like a crystallization. I was like, oh yeah, like this is what really got me into it. But I mean, 4 is the one hole that sticks out most, but there's so many stretches out there that I don't think I could pick just one. Like 11 is another incredible golf hole that I think the more you play it, seeing how much wider that fairway is than it looks, but trying 12. Yes. Yeah. 11 is the par 3, right? 12 along the edge. Yep. 12 is an all world golf hole, but I think you could play that golf course every day and find a new favorite golf hole at each experience.
Yeah, it's just it's an extremely enjoyable place to play golf. And like, I think like the other thing that it does is like you always are hitting different shots out there from different lies. It's a fairly severe piece of land. But like, you're always hitting from uneven lies to targets that are up or down. It's, it is a golf course that you would get a lot better playing golf at. And I think like Prairie Dunes obviously is a phenomenal. We have been very forthright with our adoration of Prairie Dunes over the years on this. But one of the things that I like about Old Town so much, it's probably my favorite 18-hole Perry Maxwell design. Obviously Prairie Dunes is 9 holes of Perry Maxwell, 9 holes of Press, his son. The whole 18 at Old Town is really, really incredible. And they've obviously, with the help of Corin Crenshaw and Dunlop White, the great greens chair there, or golf chair, they've done some amazing work. And I think it's like one of the most fully realized in terms of potential golf courses that there is in the world. Like it is presented like pretty much the way it was intended to be presented in terms of width and green sizes. What trip are you most looking forward to taking, or would you want to most take in 2025? It doesn't have to be on the calendar.
So I'll answer both questions. Two that are on the calendar. I can't wait to return to Michigan. I know we share the love for the state, but we have a couple of trips on the calendar, both northern Michigan and southwest Michigan, and both golf and non-golf wise. I just can't wait to return to both of those areas. We're going to southwest Michigan in the spring, and then northern Michigan in the fall is about as good as it gets in the country, in my opinion. And then, so both of those, golf and on-golf, I think on the calendar, I'm most excited for. And then this year was the first time I ever went to Europe, and so got that bug a little bit. I still haven't played golf over there, but got to take a couple of trips. One of them was our honeymoon, which is obviously amazing, to Greece. So that was really cool. And I think that bug has definitely got me right now. There's all sorts of countries that I'm looking forward to seeing in the future. I think Spain and Portugal are pretty high on that list right now. I've seen a lot of people start going to that area, and Portugal especially. And my wife studied abroad in Barcelona, so I know that's an area that she wants to get back to and kind of show me around a little bit.
Yeah, I think one of the things about Spain and Portugal, from what I understand, also is like it's a very affordable area still. Like it hasn't gotten like the crazy tourist expenses. Was there 2 trips to Europe? Pretty awesome. I'm pretty jealous of that. Was there a particular country or place that you didn't have high expectations of that you loved?
Yeah, I think everyone should go to Slovenia, and it not just because Luka is fun, but the entire. So we did a Croatia-Slovenia combo trip, and all of my research was really on Croatia leading into it. So like did all the coastal stuff. It was amazing. It is as scenic as you expect it to be. But then we jumped over to Slovenia and did the capital is Ljubljana, and then we went up to I think it's just kind of a vacation town, but it's Lake Bled, and both of those just blew me away. I think it compared to Croatia, especially, it was pretty affordable. Ljubljana as a city is just as beautiful as many other European cities are in that area, and I think that's one that people have started combining with Croatia more, but it's something that I would highly, highly recommend people go do.
All right, good underrated travel recs here from Will. What was the pro golf moment that you enjoyed the most this year?
So I didn't get to watch it live, but I think that made it better. So we were in Greece during the President's Cup, and I got to wake up and all of the nonsense of Siwoo Kim's night celebration against I don't even know. I think it was against Cantlay, right? And Cantlay and Xander, and I saw he put him to sleep or whatever, and I thought that clip was hilarious. And then it was about 3 hours later that I realized that they lost the match. And I like truly had no idea because I wasn't watching it live. And so I'm like scrolling back through Twitter and I was like, what? And they didn't win this match? And you find out it was like 2 holes prior. At that moment, like he's had a couple in the past 10 years of the President's Cup, but he really like... I still can't believe that he did that celebration without winning that match. Or did they tie it? I can't even remember. But
they lost on 18. Yeah, you can't do the night if you're not going to win. That being said, I think Siwoo Kim was a big time winner of the President's Cup because he splashes every year at the President's Cup every time he plays.
Yeah, like right now we're just kind of clinging to any moment that brings us joy in the President's Cup, and him and Tom Kim have certainly brought that every year so far. And hopefully he'll just keep him around because we just need more. We need him shushing the crowd when they're about to get shut out. We need him doing the night celebration and losing matches. It's just a new era for the President's Cup.
I mean,
he took down remember the Quill Hollow? He had that epic Sunday singles match with JT. He had some boisterous reactions there. All right, Siwoo Kim getting the moment of 2024 from Will, not live. I do love the fact that you assumed he won and then hours later realized he did not win. That makes the moment.
That will be something that not the moment itself, but the moment that I realized what really happened is something that's going to stick with me for a while, because it was kind of like a fever dream, right? It's like 9 a.m. and I'm just kind of putting the pieces together, and it's like, God, what a sports moment that really was for all the right and wrong reasons.
All right, thanks, Will. We'll talk sometime in 2025 about the travels. All right, Cameron Hurdus, a man that does not like to come on the mic, creator of all of our video content, does a lot of our photo editing, does a lot of our logos, is a big part of what we do, but rarely, actually loathes talking about what he does. But he's been very, very busy the last couple weeks pumping out YouTube content. If you haven't checked out the YouTube stuff, there's been a really great video on Sedge Valley, a really great video on maintenance at Oakmont, and a phenomenal video about Sweetens Cove. I ran out of superlatives there, good describers there. Cameron, what golf course right now do you find yourself thinking about the most?
First off, it's great to be here, Andy. Thanks for having me. It's probably a bit of recency bias, but I think about George Wright a lot. Garrett and I went and saw it as part of our Essex County fried egg event trip, because we're filming that. I mean, that's a bit of a preview, but that'll be the next All Grasses local episode that we're going to come out with. And, for those that haven't been there, it's a Donald Ross course that was built as part of the New Deal back in the 30s. And I mean, I think it might be the best public golf course in the country on some of the most incredible land. It wasn't that long ago, but I think about it a lot.
I think so. When I saw it a couple of years ago, I was blown away by the land, and I had the same thought as I was like, this is without a doubt the best municipal golf course in the world. I think one of the funny aspects of that is there's this huge Boston, New York sports rivalry, and I think it's widely accepted that Bethpage Black is the best municipal golf course in the country, but I do not agree at all. I think George Wright is a way better golf course, a way more fun golf course. I think just you walk out there and the first couple holes are they're really good, but they're nothing crazy. And then you get to the fifth hole, and that's where I was just holy shit.
Yeah, and I haven't been to Bethpage, so I can't speak on that. But like you said, but even the second the second shot into 2 is fun, and then you play up the valley on 3, ridge to ridge par 3 on 4, and then the fairway on 5 is one of the most amazing fairways you'll play anywhere. And when you go through the round, there's really only one hole that I'm sort of just and that's I think it's what is it, 11, I think, that plays along the pond. I mean, that's the big thing too, is they had to fill basically a swamp in that part of the property when they built the golf course. And so it's just sort of a connector hole that plays along a pond on the left. That's the only hole in the golf course that I'm it's okay. Every other hole in the golf course, you just think back and you're some of these would be the best hole on any golf course you play.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine, one of the things I loved about the place too is this is in the weeds, but it's a course for the people. And I'll never forget it. One of my memories was I went out there, I didn't have time to play, I just walked it. And I went out there, and literally like the first tee time of the day, and I think it was on a Saturday morning, was two like middle-aged women who were carrying their bags. And when I ended up talking to the superintendent, Len, and I was like, these women are like flying. Because like I was walking by myself. I mean, it was dark when I started to walk. And like they were like keeping up with me. And he was like, oh yeah, they play every weekend, the first tee time off. Like it is like definitely, it's a course for the people. It's affordable. And I think like the thing that stands out when I compare it to Bethpage is just like the interest at the green, because it is like, Bethpage has like such dramatic shots to get to the green, but then you get to the green and it's just very mundane. It's very like, it's almost like municipal golf greens, right? Where you just are, it's very uninteresting. At George Wright, like I am very convinced that if George Wright went to like, this is like a hypothetical and you would never want this to happen, but if George Wright had 10,000 rounds in the maintenance budget of a high-end private club, I think it would be one of the 2 or 3 best golf courses in Boston.
I completely agree. And I mean, this is a bit of like a preview of the episode, but that's the other thing too, is Len, the superintendent, who is a character, just the most amazing guy, has that place dialed in too. Unlike, it's a city golf course, and he's got a crew of just sort of normal working class guys. And honest,
one of the guys when I was there was maintaining the golf course in a Bruins jersey.
I believe it. I mean, they were some of the best greens we putted on the entire trip through Boston. Which, I mean, it's, if you haven't been there, go, make it part of a Boston golf trip, because it's like, it is unbelievable.
All right, let's talk a little travel. You travel quite a bit. I feel like you go to interesting places personally. You go to great places professionally. What are you most excited? What's a trip that you would most like to make in 2025? It could be golf or non-golf related.
I think for a lot of my life, and I do love to travel, I've always thought abroad, and I do love traveling abroad. But one thing I've enjoyed about this job is I grew up in the Northwest and I live on the West Coast, and outside of like seeing some family, I haven't seen a lot of the country. And so one thing I've loved about this job is being able to see a lot of new places in the United States. One trip, it's sort of catnippy right now, but I still haven't been through sort of the new South Carolina courses. Old Barnwell, place we've gone to a lot. The Aiken area. I think that's sort of still a blind spot for me, and a place that I would love to check out as soon as possible.
It's because you go there for a week, but you go there and you go to Augusta National and only Augusta National all week to take photos. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy that vein of sand. It's like that, just like it runs from, effectively like Pinehurst through Aiken down through Georgia. I really want to see OCM's work at Fall Line. That's another one in that general sand pocket in Georgia. We'll see if we can make that happen. It's just hard getting away as much and adding up, because the Augusta thing, you go to the Masters. I'm not complaining about it. But yeah, it's like you're in this great area and there's so many places that you want to see around there, and it's like, well, we go to the tournament for 7 straight days, effectively. What's your favorite pro golf moment from 2024?
Everyone will remember this, but there was, speaking of the Masters, which I was very lucky to photograph the whole week, there was a moment you were following Bryson, and we ran into each other, and it was, what round was it? Was it like the second round? It was the third round. And he blasted his drive right on 13. and you turned to me and you said, I think he got up to his ball and he started looking right. And you turned to me and you're like, I think he's going to go up 14 because he was deep in the trees on 13. And I was like, I think you're right. So I sprinted up to the top of the hill, sort of between 13 and 14. And what unfolded was one of the most bizarre, I think, things anyone has ever seen in their lives. Bryson decides he's just going to, on his own, pull out one of the Augusta navigation signs and start carrying it around like a cross. I mean, it was just like they were there were volunteers like trying to grab it from him. He wouldn't give it up. He was just hauling it around, and I'm not even sure what his plan was necessarily. The one thing that I am upset about is I ended up on the wrong side taking photos of him because he turned around and started walking the other way. So I didn't get a great shot of his face carrying the sign, but it's a moment I'll never forget.
I mean, he's a content star now. He knows what people are looking for. Like no other golfer would have done that unless they understand like the aspects of the content around the business like that. You know, it goes. I mean, 2024 was kind of like the year of Bryson in the majors, and it goes back to the Masters. That was like kind of the first moment there when he started to become a little bit more likable, from like the mainstream golfer, and then it obviously like crescendoed at the U.S. Open, where he was like very much just playing to the crowd. But these are all like very keen, aware, understanding like what's going to happen if I pull out this signpost myself. Like it's going to get pictures taken about of it, and people are going to think it's awesome.
I mean, the other thing too that people maybe don't even remember, I wasn't watching the tournament at the time, but he hit the shot up onto 14 and then hit like an amazing shot onto the green onto 13 from there. And I think it just illustrates like he's willing to think of things on the golf course that I think a lot of other pros aren't even willing to like consider. I've never seen anyone lay up onto 14 from the trees on 13. But he was willing to do it, and then he executed the two shots as well.
When I think back to that moment, like as soon as he got there, I saw him just he didn't even like think about it. And I thought back in my head, I was like, he thought about playing to 14 from the forward tee on 13 before they moved the tee box back. This was something he talked about. And it was like, it was like that like clicked. And that's when I knew he was going right, was that like, oh, he used to think about playing up there before they moved the tee box back. And it was like, that's like why he didn't even look left. He never looked left. And I think like 99% of players would have just chipped it out to the left because there was like a chip out to be made. And you would have had, 220 yards from a hanging lie into the green, a really hard shot for a third. Instead, he got it like up to a relatively flat lie. Well, he was actually by the grandstand, right? But he got the free drop. Relatively flat lie to hit a wedge from. Like it was a super smart golf shot. All right, Cameron. Thank you. I would love how enthusiastic and excited you were to come on this podcast today. All right, the mic's being turned around a bit here. Usually behind the mic, doing the mix of the ones and twos. PJ Clark, pod producer extraordinaire, is joining me. PJ, what is the golf course that you find yourself thinking the most about?
This is a byproduct of my living circumstance, I think. But the golf course that I think the most about, probably on a daily basis, is Bethpage Black. For location reasons, but also because, we're heading into a Ryder Cup year. Very, very important to me personally.
You got your gear.
I've been outfitted in pre-COVID 2024 Ryder Cup year since like 2017. So I'm ready for it. But I mean, the PGA at 2019. We'll see what happens with Jordan Spieth. We'll see what happens with Brooks Koepka. But there might be some holdovers from that. But I'm excited for the upcoming year of everybody talking about Bethpage Black.
I think, when I posed this question, you said the only course I think about is Bethpage Black. You played it this fall. Was there something that you realized about the course in playing it in the fall that you hadn't, thought about or noticed before?
Well, they moved the first tee, which I didn't realize. I actually texted my dad after we had teed off that day, like, hey, have you ever seen this tee box before? Because I hadn't. I had no idea where it came from, and I was very confused why we were playing from there. But they have moved the first tee to make a horseshoe around the 18th green and the first tee box all in one bleacher setup now. So the first hole itself is going to play completely differently. It's a way easier angle to cut the corner and try to drive that green if you're a Bryson or a longer hitter. I think it's going to be close to possible, if not possible, depending on the wind. But that I mean, it's a completely different start to the round, which was jarring for me showing up 20 minutes beforehand, and then they were like, "Oh, you're teeing off from over here." And I was like, "I don't know where we're going."
As I remember, we had an early morning podcast recording that was kind of jamming you. It was will PJ get to his tee time in time? What does Bethpage mean to a native Long Islander? Is there a lot of pride that comes with it? Like, what is it that Bethpage makes you feel as a Long Islander?
Yeah, I think it's a huge sense of pride to have these big, huge events, and the Ryder Cup is obviously like a different stratosphere than a PGA or even a U.S. Open. The biggest event in golf being at a place that is so accessible to people, and that, I have friends that aren't even golfers, but everybody wants to go play. Not even just the black, but go play the yellow or the green. It's a place where like so many people grow up playing golf. Like the first time I ever went, my dad pulled me out of school to go to the U.S. Open in 2009, and like that's something I'll never forget. And growing up and figuring out that I could play that course and see those holes, and I know where I was when I saw Padraig Harrington in 2009, and trying to hit the same shots and be in the same bunkers. I have seen parts of that course that probably nobody has ever seen before, and been in just terrible locations there. But I'm excited to have the biggest event in sports, on Long Island. I think that's really a sense of pride for a lot of people.
What trip are you most excited about potentially taking? What trip do you want to take in 2025?
It lines up with the golf schedule, but the number one MLB ballpark that has been on my list forever has been Pittsburgh, PNC Park. I've done the stadium tour, but I have never actually seen a game there, and that's number one. I want to check that off in 2025. I mean, it helps that the U.S. Open is a half hour away, but that, to me, I've spent a couple of weekends in Pittsburgh before when the Pirates have not been home, but I really like the city. Always a good Primanti Bros sandwich. I think Pittsburgh is like a really underrated, like beautiful place that I've really enjoyed spending time in, and I'm excited to go back.
What if the Pirates are on a away trip? What if they don't have a homestand? Will you be disappointed? Will you do another stadium tour?
I checked, and we're in the clear. We're in the clear, at least for the beginning of the week. Monday through Wednesday, they're home. So I feel good about my odds on hopefully checking that one off.
So you're saying we need to procure some team tickets for that week?
I mean, I'd go by myself if I had to, but it would be a lot more fun if anybody was with me. I know Cameron has said that PNC is a favorite of his too. So I think that would be great.
Have you been to the Giants Stadium?
No, I've been outside of it. I went to the new Warriors arena in January. No, not a fan.
It's just like so sterile, you know? It's nice. It's a nice stadium. I feel like nothing really compares though to like Madison Square Garden when it comes to basketball.
That is fair. That is fair. But I mean, I saw Lakers Warriors, so people were juiced. It was that like triple overtime game. That was a really cool experience. But no, I have not checked. It's not AT&T anymore. Oracle.
It's Oracle. Yeah. You know, you got to do the Oracle. I took the ferry in. It was unbelievable because I live north of the city and I got on a ferry and the boat dropped me in the outfield, basically at the outfield gate. It was the most unique way to get there, but the beautiful park. All right. Last question. What is the pro golf moment from 2024 you will remember the most?
Outside of Scotty Scheffler getting arrested, which is obviously important, and I don't think anybody will forget. And as great as Xander was to me, when I look back on 2024, I will think of it as the year of Bryson. In all four majors. I mean, obviously he was great at the Masters. He was great at the PGA, and he was a great form of content for 2 days at the Open Championship. But I will look back on Bryson as a whole being the story of this year to me, but really his shot on Sunday at the US Open on 8, where he had hit it like long left of the green and was chipping back up this hill, and it was really just, you know, he had to make the up and down, he had to make par, and to get it up and down from the side where he was, it was not going to be easy, and he made, I think it was like a 6 or an 8 footer. It was not terribly long for par, and he just ripped like a huge fist pump on the 8th green, and that was like, that to me was kind of the story of Bryson's whole year, is that he always found a way to kind of battle back. He did it down the stretch at the PGA, and he obviously held on at the US Open, but when I think if I had to pick like one Bryson moment from the year, I would pick that 8th hole on Sunday as opposed to the 18th.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. The 18th up and down was insane, incredible, and what it does because of the moment in time and it being like that clutch moment. Like a lot of people, when they think about football games, like think about the last drive, but they forget a lot of times about like maybe they had a great little short drive at the end of the first half that got them 3 points that had them in the position to make the final drive. The up and down on 8, with Rory making a birdie on 9, like while this is happening, you know, and Rory goes on a run right from there. The 8th hole kept him in striking distance. It was like so important because he did not get off to a great start. And that up and down on 8 was insanely hard. You couldn't have put a ball really, like you could have put a ball in the waist area and it would have been, but like in terms of short grass, you couldn't have put a ball in a much worse position than that. Great moment, great year, PJ, and look forward to chatting more in 2025. All right, next up on the hot seat here, Joseph LaMagna, a frequent guest of this podcast. Joseph, I'm asking everybody a couple questions here. What golf course do you find yourself thinking about the most these days?
Andy, I wish I didn't see as many haven't really seen as many golf courses playing myself the last couple of years. So that's an effort moving forward for me. One golf course I find myself thinking about all the time that has been central to my understanding of golf, especially with a professional golf slant, is TPC Sawgrass. And I do think for like one question that a lot of people who are interested in getting into professional golf and the data side and the predictive side ask is, where do you start? I think understanding TPC Sawgrass and Augusta and the ways that those two golf courses are different is a really good starting point. I find myself thinking about TPC Sawgrass the story behind it, what it represents for the tour, and what kind of skills that it magnifies. I think about TPC Sawgrass like all the time.
It's amazing with modern golf architects how much influence is derived from Harbor Town and TPC Sawgrass. Like you hear, like I think Tom Doak, Bill Core comes to mind. Mike Kaprowski said something about TPC Sawgrass the other day on this podcast, and like there is such a resounding influence from the Pete Dye thing. What is it? What about the shots and the way the golf course is that you think it has such a a unique spot in the game of golf?
I think it's twofold. One, the architecture itself, the character of the holes, the small greens, the reliability of wind, and what that brings out in certain players, especially the Justin Thomas round where the conditions were extremely choppy and he was flighting the ball everywhere. Like that's a round that stands out. That's going to happen more often at TPC Sawgrass than other golf courses. But I also think the forward thinking of Pete Dye in what TPC Sawgrass represents as a television product, the dynamism of the closing stretch, the way that fans sit, the amphitheater style of a lot of the holes. There's something brilliant about that foresight. And I kind of disagree with people who don't necessarily think that a closing stretch needs to be dynamite for it to be an exciting golf tournament. I think that's a pretty important component of a golf course. And the way TPC Sawgrass captures that, where it's not over until the end, it's a brilliant golf course, especially for professional golf.
What you just said about closing stretches makes you all the more frustrated with the PGA Tour, how they like to jerry-rig their closing stretches of match play events. Rerouting the course so that they can make sure that certain holes are seen in case matches end. But like the golf course is laid out in a certain way to tell a certain story. And when you change the routing, it absolutely changes the feel and the, as you use, dynamism of a golf course and how it can be portrayed on TV. Let's talk travel. In 2025, is there a trip that you're going on or a trip you'd like to go on that you would most look forward to?
I don't know if I'm going to make it happen in 2025. My top travel destination now for like 10 years running probably is Japan. And I think the combination of how far it is plus the language barrier has been intimidating for me. But that I cannot wait to do that trip, and I want to make sure I do it right. So I don't know if that's 2025, but Japan, if people have recommendations for how to do that trip correctly, I think that's like a once in a lifetime. I cannot wait to do that.
I have found myself more and more wanting to go to Japan. I think like what's interesting to me, I have a family member who they go to like Asia, Southeast Asia, and Japan, that part of the world a lot. And they were telling my wife and I about how they always do layovers in Tokyo. There's like flight options to do layovers, and they're like, it's our favorite place we've ever been. You just hear resoundingly great feedback, like maybe the best food in the world. Maybe like the cleanest place in among the cleanest places in the world, the most polite people in the world. Sure, there's a language barrier, and then there's just so much to do. There's the outdoors, there's the architecture, there is like, it is high on my list. I think for personal travel, there is some good golf there too. I could probably parlay it with a golf trip, but I've got a few places that are a little higher up on the golf. This is more of a personal thing for me. All right, professional golf, 2024. What's the moment you'll remember?
Yeah, I might be cheating here in that it's not necessarily a shot. I think the potential for Scotty Scheffler to rise as a superstar that resonates with more people. Like, I might be making too much of this match that's coming up in December, but the idea that Scotty's going a little bit rogue in that match with Rory, Bryson, and Brooks, asserting his place in the game and feeling more comfortable expressing his personality. Like something I was thinking about last night, I was watching an interview with Steph Curry, and I don't follow Steph closely enough to maintain that this is definitely true, but like I think there's been this clamoring for Scottie Scheffler to have a different personality than he has. I think excellence and dignity as a form of superstardom is where Scottie Scheffler could potentially rise, elevate his profile. And we don't need him to take on a personality that isn't his. Being dominant, being classy, and going out and winning golf tournaments is a very attractive brand of superstardom, regardless of how many people it attracts.
I think that this last half of the year, like basically the rest was a great moment for Scottie because it gave people something to. The rest was not a great moment for Scottie, but like a great moment for Scottie PR because it gave something for like common fans to like glom onto, like as to why they liked him. You know, he handled that arrest wonderfully. He got arrested in the morning, then he went out and shot 66 or 67. Like that's like out of this world, easy way for people to relate or to find fandom in him. But I also think since that moment, he has leveled up in how he communicates with the media. If you watch his press conferences closely, they've gotten a lot more interesting. He's spoken his mind substantially more than he did a couple years ago. And I think it's like realistic to just say, like, you know, if you're in your mid-20s and you're a golfer that rises to superstardom, you haven't had to be in front of the mic a lot. That's a hard thing. It takes time to get used to. It could take a couple years, and maybe we're just starting to see Scottie really feel comfortable with expressing his opinions. And, you know, I think he's only going to get more comfortable the longer he is at the top of the game, which seems like, you know, mathematically, he's going to be the number one ranked player in the world for some time. He's got a huge lead. So he is going to continue to get like, you know, it's a change where you go from a player that never gets interviewed to a player that gets interviewed if you play well, to a player that gets interviewed semi-regularly because you're, you know, a top 10 player in the world. The number one ranked player in the world, you get interviewed everywhere you go, every round. And I think like a lot of it is just reps of getting used to being interviewed and realizing, you know what, I can just tell people what's on my mind, and it works.
Yeah, it's crystallizing for me, I guess, as we're talking through it. I'd say my favorite moment, professional golf moment, was the day of his arrest. Not the arrest itself, but his press conference after he went out and fired a very solid round where he even said things like, I probably shouldn't be divulging as much information as I am here. I think he understands that speaking the truth and asserting his voice is a powerful asset he has. And he's not as, he's definitely reserved and careful with what he says, but he's doing less of that in a very dignified way while dominating on the golf course. And that's a cool brand for Scottie Scheffler to have.
Yeah, you know, I had a moment with him this year where I was at Riviera and I was talking with a media member about the Myrtle Beach event and the qualifier, like the influencer qualifier. And we were batting around back and forth, and Scottie like just like was putting and walked over and he goes, "What are you guys talking about?" And we're like, "The Myrtle Beach event." He's like, "What do you think?" And I said, like, I mean, like if you're doing something like this, it probably isn't a PGA Tour event and shouldn't exist. Like it's not like, this is not a real, like they wouldn't do this for any other sport. And he gave me like his opinion on it. And he was like, "So that's what I think." And he like just turned around and like kept putting. And his opinion was like, you know what? It's going to garner more interest and it's good for that local event. So they should do that. I think like we're on differing sides. Like, I just don't think that should be happening on the tour that Scottie Scheffler plays on. But, you know, I appreciated his frank commentary, right, to like exactly what he thought about the subject. And I was like, I would like to see more. And that was really before he started to come out of his shell. Like, I love the opinionated nature of like, this is what I think about it.
I think you may think of other names here. I think there's a chance Scotty Scheffler's voice will carry more weight than any other professional golfers in the next 5 years. He's not somebody clamoring for the microphone and being obnoxious and always has a comment on things. Like, he speaks when he speaks, and I think his results back it up. I do think there's a chance with how thoughtful he is and even-keeled, his voice may carry more weight than any other professional golfers.
All right. Thank you, Joseph. We look forward to talking to you a great deal more the rest of this year and next year on this podcast and reading your writing and everything else. So thanks for coming on. All right. Thank you for listening to another edition of the Friday Golf Podcast. And big thanks to PJ Clark, guest of this podcast and producer of this here podcast. We will be back next week with a couple new episodes. Big thanks for listening, as always, and we'll talk to you next week.